Welcome to this Seascape acrylic tutorial using one large brush and a palette knife. I finished my Peggy's Cove painting tutorial of a lighthouse a few days ago and I had all this leftover paint. I didn't want to waste it, so I was really inspired just to do a really simple, fun seascape, which I really hope it inspires you to do something like this, especially if you found maybe with the lighthouse might be a bit complicated. This is so loose. So shall we get started? So for a full list of all the materials I'm going to be using in this tutorial, please see the description below along with the photo link. I'm using a large flat 1.5 inch synthetic brush and I'm painting this on acrylic paper, and I've used some washi tape around the border so I'll get a nice white border when I remove it at the end. I'm diluting this primary blue for the sky area, so I'm almost painting like you would do in watercolour, watering it down. I almost find sometimes painting skies in acrylics like watercolour is a lot easier, especially because acrylics dry so quickly. To help me with the drying time, I've made a homemade stay wet palette, as you can see here, using a plastic box. Underneath that greaseproof paper is some paper towel which I've wet, so it keeps the paints from drying out, and I'll put a link for this, how I made this, in the description below. This is a little bit of the blue and the red mixed together. I literally drew this wet on dry with this large brush. I'm just going to stick with this large brush. Why am I using just one brush? It really does get you just to simplify everything, especially if you started out painting, whether it be in acrylics or any other medium, just to focus on the main details. So I'm using some, basically some of these colours are already pre-mixed from my previous painting, and I'll put a link for the lighthouse painting in the description below. But it's a very simple composition here: sky, land, and I've actually sort of just blocking in these rocks here to form a triangle where I'm going to paint the sea. So you've got sort of 4 elements: sky, land, rocks and sea. So it makes it really simple. In acrylics we work dark to light, so I'm just basically painting these quite bright colours wet on dry with this large flat brush. Just getting some exciting sort of shapes and dark tonal values there. Just watered down this primary blue here as well, which is a cold blue. Cold blues make great greens. Warm blues like ultramarine make fabulous violets. And I'm painting this wet on dry, very dilute here. And I'm actually just added a bit of yellow to that blue to create the distant sea. And I'm also dropping in some of that sort of blue-green colour, wet into wet, into the near side sea. And I'm actually using a little bit of yellow oxide there, just to paint again on the rocks in the foreground. You're using one brush, you really do learn a lot about it, because you're always trying to figure out ways of getting marks. Sometimes when you've got a small little round brush, it really does tighten you up. This way you can be very experimental, very creative, almost painting a sort of semi-abstract seascape here. I'm mixing in a little bit of the red, the white and the oxide yellow. If you don't have oxide yellow, you could use yellow ochre. I'm painting this on now, wet on dry. I've dried all my painting off. It's always a good idea to do that. This is the next layer. That first layer was pretty much an underpainting just to get me started. So I'm just sort of painting now, chiseling this paint on almost like a sculptor to get these lovely marks and colours, and just experiment when you're painting like this as well, and just keep it really simple and fun. As you can see there, I'm just painting the sea with my flat brush, and I'm actually using the top of the brush and printing marks on these rocks with a dark sort of violet colour there, and just sort of finding little marks here and there and then printing. It's so nice to use the brush in this way and just trying all sorts of different ways of using it to create different marks. I've swapped now to my palette knife. It's just a plastic palette knife. You can use any palette knife or even a plastic store card cut up. My painting has been dried again, and I'm going to paint some lights in the sea. I've mixed up some white into the primary blue, and I'm just sort of scrubbing this into the sea to create texture, light, and also describing the waves crashing up against the rocks. I'm just painting now again with the palette knife, creaming it on almost like buttering toast, and I'm using some white and yellow and just painting some lights at the top of these rocks here where the sunlight's hitting it, and again on these bottom rocks here as well, sort of scrubbing it on so you get some nice texture as well using the palette knife. I mixed up red and blue here, and I'm just painting some darks on the rocks. You could actually use violet and the yellow oxide as well, or yellow ochre. If you don't have these colours, I will have alternatives in the description below. And I just want to get these darks, and I'm almost drawing with the tip of the palette knife as well to get these different marks, darks and textures in. Again, I'm working wet on dry here. I'm painting in the waves, a little bit more definite here, really scooping up that white paint, taking a bit off my kitchen towel and then sort of scraping it off on the edge of the rocks there to create a little bit of movement as well with the waves. Make sure your painting is dry because otherwise it's going to pick up the blue paint and it'll end up having blue waves. This is a bit tricky because I love a spatter, so it's quite hard to spatter with this very large brush, but it's a challenge. So I've just had a little go there and it's not quite worked. So I've added a little bit more water, watered it down. I'm afraid it might go everywhere though, because it's quite a large brush. So you might want to go for a smaller brush if you're doing this. So I'm just tapping the side of the brush there just to get that paint of the brush hairs there onto the surface of the painting there, just to create a little bit of sparkle, lots of little white dots, so it looks like the spray of the ocean waves. If you're going to do this, make sure that you haven't got anything valuable that could get ruined by the spatter. I'm also going to use, I'm just lifting off a little bit there with my paper towel, but I'm going to use my palette knife as well to scrape out a little bit here and there to create some light and textures and, you know, sort of marks on the sea. So it's quite nice to do as well, just to pull off some of that white paint. I quite like painting from the side there because I seem to paint lines a bit straighter, those marks. Now, I didn't think I could do this, but I'm actually painting the birds with the palette knife there. And I'm using a little bit of violet with the Oxide yellow, and I'm just sort of painting this or painting it on with my palette knife, wet on dry. I just went over it again because they were a little bit pale. And it's just a nice way of finishing off. It creates movement and life in your little painting. I'm removing the washi tape now to reveal a really nice white border. I'm really pleased with this painting. I enjoyed painting it. I really hope I've inspired you to maybe just use one large brush, a palette knife, a handful of paints, and just paint something like this. If you have any questions about this tutorial, please put them in the comments section. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for updates of my latest tutorials. Thank you again for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.